Well, driving through the gap, everybody saw the mountain. You could see it from the turnpike coming south.
There's a whole mountainside here that has nothing green on it. It's just bare rock.
It was a moonscape.
The Lehigh Gap Nature Center is a really unusual place because it's the only environmental education center in the country that was created out of a Superfund site. A Superfund site is a federally designated toxic waste site. This is a Superfund site that was caused by emissions from smokestacks.
You can't talk about the work that's been done on the mountainside here without talking a little bit about the history of Palmerton and the history of New Jersey Zinc Company.
The New Jersey Zinc Company was a very responsible, very good company.
What happened in the 80 years or so that the smelting process was in operation at Palmerton was that there were emissions. There were emissions in the form of zinc oxide and some of the other metals that went along with it. And there were also emissions of sulfur gases, what we would refer to today as acid rain.
Initially, I think a lot of people just sort of said, well, it's a byproduct of the industry. The zinc company was actually very good to the people. They did a lot of investment in the community, or treated the workers really well. And so people had a real allegiance to the company. And so this was just sort of like, oh, it's too bad it happened.
It was just aerial deposition of the pollutants from the smokestacks. It just fell out of the sky and contaminated the land. But this pollution was happening in the 30s and 40s and 50s before we had the technology to stop it.
Consequently, the mountainside suffered what we refer to as stress.
This was an environmental eyesore. It was a psychological problem for people of the area because there's this dead mountain that's surrounding you, and people just kind of learned to live with it.
I remember the first time I came driving on 248 and you come around the curve and you see on the north or the south side of the mountain all the greenery, and then you used to come around and it was like the moon.
They thought it was going to be like that forever.
Palmerton area was put on that first Superfund list back in 1983.
When the EPA came in and designated them a Superfund site, it's almost like getting a black label, you know, kind of a letter that you're scarred for life. And there was a lot of resentment.
EPA and the zinc company started working on remediating the area.
What they did, they brought sewage sludge in. Now to do that, they had to make roads on the other side. They had to terrace the mountainside to get their trucks up there. They'd spent millions of dollars doing the terracing. And they put the sewage sludge down, and they got growth, but they also got a lot of invasive species.
Nothing worked well enough for EPA to say, yes, this is good, this is how we're going to do this. Our idea was very different than theirs. There are places in southeastern Pennsylvania called serpentine barrens, where the soil is naturally high in metals. And what grows there? These prairie grasses. And so we transferred that ecological paradigm to here and said, this should work.
We were so naive, we didn't understand all the different aspects that we'd have to overcome to do this. The original concept was, yeah, we get some seed and spread it around the mountainside and let nature run its course. It was not that easy when you're working with the EPA and the Superfund order and a lot of scientists and engineers and whatnot that have regulations they have to follow, so we had to thread that needle.
The first year, in 2003, the first summer, we were not allowed to do any full-scale revegetation work. We were required by EPA to set up test plots.
Some had fertilizer, some had lime, some had fertilizer and lime, some had compost. They wanted to see what worked best.
After studying those test plots for 3 years, in 2006, we were then allowed to do full-scale planting of our whole property. We hired crop dusters, airplanes, to come and fly and spread the seed over the steep areas.
They were pushing $1,000 bags of seed out the airplane. The mountain is green now because of that.
I've been up on the trail or in the field with students, and people will come by and they'll ask what we're doing and start talking, and they'll start crying. They say it's, you know, we never thought we'd see the mountain green again.
I think the mission of the Lehigh Gap Nature Center, education, conservation, and research of this spot is critical to this region.
You know, a lot of kids come out here from Allentown on field trips that have never experienced nature. The children are not only being taught about the environment, but they're being taught about how we can work with nature and create something very nice that many people can experience.
So when is it considered good enough? EPA has parameters set for that. We're getting close to those.
I don't think we're going to diverge a lot from what we already do here. We're continuing to look at research and make choices about conservation on the property.
It's never really finished because you're going to always be managing.